Previously on Drone Wars.
I kind of got upset with the self-congratulatory. We've increased it by 4. I hear 80% of that is going to a few companies, and the rest of us are literally fighting for table scraps. My lesson learned from that was the government's going to solve the problem. The government realized that only the free market can create the capabilities that are needed to fight and win World War II. So they relied on private industry. I'm not seeing that yet, and there's this desire to help, but there has to be a return on investment.
This is Dan Magy, host of the Drone Wars podcast, where we talk about all things autonomous systems, air, land, sea, and space. And this week, we're joined by Chris Miller, former acting Secretary of Defense and current Chief Strategy Officer at Design, who's going to tell us all about how he sees autonomous systems changing the battlefield. So let me ask you just a couple quick questions here, right? Where do you think autonomous systems go in the scheme of things over the next 3 to 5 years?
I don't know if I can predict, but I'll try. I read like the Army now is like, oh, we need to have more small autonomous systems in our units. And now they're talking like in the 100, like this, we haven't even scratched the surface, man. I'm telling you what, we're going to have fleets. We're going to have drone cavalry before this thing's over. And Dan, where I'm really frustrated right now, I know they're really, really smart people in the services and in the Pentagon that are thinking about this, but there are pockets of like excellence all around that understand what's happening. But the blob, the Borg, has not accepted that warfare has fundamentally changed. Not the nature. The nature's fear, loathing, hatred, frog friction. We're talking about the character of war. Autonomy and quantity has fundamentally changed how we're going to fight right now. And I don't see that recognition, man. And that's what concerns me is we have brilliant people that are trying to thread it together. And once we get there, right now, we are still literally whistling past the graveyard and have not accepted how fundamental these technologies are.
Yeah. I mean, a couple points here. I saw yesterday, South Korea, they're eliminating their mortar teams. You know what they're going to retrain all their mortar teams to do? Be drone pilots.
Why not?
Simple, easy win, right? So how far does a mortar work? Like 1.5 miles, 2 miles max?
Yeah, 50. I was mortar platoon leader. It was like 1,564 yards. I can't remember.
So
I'm off a little
let's
bit.
retrain them to be pilots and use FPVs and loitering munitions. And now you're talking 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, right? That's an easy win.
But why hasn't that been embraced by our military? Because Dan, you just talked about a mortar team. Actually, typically the mortars are with the company headquarters. They're 3 or 4 platoons of 40 people. We can have an infantry squad right now take one of your products or someone else's products and put eyes or fires onto a target in a matter of minutes that currently takes best case to put steel on target with organic mortars in your infantry company, best case, 5 minutes. You can do that now in probably 90 seconds. Can you imagine how that puts your enemy in this dilemma, man? So that's where I'm glad you're doing this, and I'm glad it's going to happen. But we've got to have the endurance because it's not everybody talks the valley of death. It's this valley of grief, I would argue, that if we can just get through this next couple of years before there's this embrace by the services to widely adopt these capabilities, that's where I am right now.
Yeah. So you basically got to get through some of that bureaucratic bullshit and get that institutional resistance out of the way, because we're watching like I think it's the cavalry versus machine gun moment in real time as all these armored platforms just get destroyed. And even a lot of our aerial platforms are now getting attacked too, right? So
the one thing I really am hopeful about is the Army and the Marine Corps is doing a good job too, is like get tools down to the operator level instead of like, oh, we need to develop this program of record and, jam it down from on high. Allow small units to acquire capabilities and let them test them out. And if they break them, like don't like charge them. There's this big problem in the Army right now where if you break, like you get this, and you break it, you have to buy it. They're like, hey, listen, drones are designed to not last long. Right. So, but I'm really hopeful, like if we can, because we got smart kids in the field, give them the tools, they'll figure it out. So what I'm proposing is instead of doing a top-down push, which is what the Pentagon loves to do, we need to do a bottom-up. Like let them be creative, almost Shark Tank it. Like if somebody comes up with a great idea, let that percolate up, fund it. We're doing it backwards right now.
Right. You talk a lot about that in your book, right? Is kind of like how you would help solve some of these problems. And it's empowering operators to break, test, and build things, right? How do you actually make that happen?
I've got a bunch of ideas that everybody rolls their eyes at. What was it, Gandhi? I think it wasn't true, but they claim that he's like, first they laugh at you, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. I think right now it's still being laughed at, but power this thing down. The beauty of the American military is the fighting men and women that have enormous common sense and are just kind of this eclectic group of people. If you just let them be able to experiment and test and then listen to them and pull it up. All right, so I did the math. I think there were like 145 battalions in the United States Army. Battalions like 400 to 600 people. How about we give each one of them $1 million to spend however they want? Now, believe me, some battalion's going to do something stupid and go like, oh, we love the, Philadelphia Eagles. Go get everybody Philadelphia Eagles, jerseys. Well, then we fire that commander who does that. You know what I'm saying? Like there's going to be waste built into this, but then hold people accountable. I'm like, hey man, the Philadelphia Eagles, you really bought $1 million worth of Philadelphia Eagles swag. Well, I hope you got some backside on this because you're going to need it because you're no longer in the military. So. Yeah.
But basically turn it into a marketplace of ideas.
That's why I love hanging out with you, because you take my 5 minutes of like, and turn it into, that's it, marketplace of ideas, man.
Yeah, it's the one skill set I have to condense things, hopefully.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global HQ in San Diego. From our custom-built studio inside one of our hero products, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from top industry leaders, sharing the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and bold predictions that they have for the next 5 to 10 years in autonomous systems and advanced manufacturing. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure you like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the show.
But Chris, tell us a little bit about your background. Who are you?
I'm just a father.
That was a pretty existential question, right?
Hey, thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Wow, I always hate that question. Like, how do you frame it? Kid from Iowa, father was a public servant, always had a desire to serve, went into the Army and found it like it's ultimate meritocracy, like at least early on, and really found my calling there. And then retired in 2014. I served in Iraq, Afghanistan. And if you're in DC and your wife doesn't want to move, you go into government. And so really got into thinking it would be great to end the war against Al-Qaeda, and realized we actually could do that by killing off a handful of senior leaders, and became obsessive compulsive on this task and ended up following that, and ultimately was the acting Secretary of Defense of the United States for the final couple months of the Trump administration. When you, at 12:01 on the 20th of January, the outgoing party does not have a job anymore, and really felt strongly, I'd been kind of critical of the way our military was doing things, and looked in the mirror and said, wow, it'd be hypocrite. You'd be a hypocrite if you just walked away from this. So got in defense technology and ended up with this amazing company that does autonomous flight and counter UAS and machine learning and AI. And I'm learning. And Dan, you want to know my biggest regret from my military career and government career is you'd have a contractor come in and you'd roll your eyes like this is like, and then there's always these ethics problems. Like you can't talk to a contractor. That was the biggest mistake. I should have taken every meeting with every company, because the power of our nation is in small businesses, and it's going to be the only thing that's going to save us from tyranny and autocracy. And so now I'm on the other end, and it's ironic, man. It's so ironic that I'm now the guy like hustling for meetings. Yeah. And what you are doing here at Firestorm, it's the template. If I can be of service, you got it. You're leading the way. You've been successful in the past. And you are leading this transformation that literally is existential for our country. So thanks for having me, man. And I really, really appreciate your friendship and your mentorship.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. And I appreciate every conversation we have. So you've been in private industry for a couple of years. What do you wish you knew now when you started a couple of years back?
It has, I'll tell you what, you surprised me on that one. I came out of the government and I came out in the military thinking I was a moron, because that's the way the military treats a lot of their people. And I understand now why they do that, because if you knew then how talented you were or how much you could understand this thing, you get out and make like a whole bunch of money. So you get out of the service and you're kind of like, I don't know anything about business. But what I learned, it took me 3 years, Dan. And one day I was in a meeting, I was like, okay, I think I understand this. I wish I would have had more confidence. And it wasn't imposter syndrome. It's not imposter syndrome. It was this, like, I don't think I understand business, but the principles of business, which really are like, try to be a good person. It's like deliver, under promise, over deliver. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I think you'll appreciate this, because this is the way you run your country, hopefully someday. One day. Company is, handshake and is good enough. And was really surprising when I finally had the pattern recognition in business. I was like, I actually know how to do this. And I didn't know that 3 years ago. I just didn't have the understanding or confidence. And I know you hire a lot of veterans, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think we underestimate the value of, management principles, leadership, but more importantly, just being a person of integrity and a person of your word really is exactly what we need more in business. So thanks for supporting people on that.
Yeah. And it's funny, you're not alone in saying that. I've had a bunch of my staff and a bunch of people who've come through places like the Honor Foundation say the same thing, that if they'd known how competent they actually were, maybe they would have got out earlier. So maybe fundamentally we need to be empowering people a little bit better inside of the DoD, right? So that they can reach their full potential and stay in and make a bigger difference.
That's it. And it's so nice that there's these support networks now that can coach, teach, mentor. And those like traits that make people successful in the military oftentimes are underestimated by the service member, that actually those translate well. But they have to hear it from someone like you that's actually been in business, as opposed to, some knuckle draggers like, you really need to carry a gun again, which is good. I'm all about carrying guns, don't get me wrong, but that there are other opportunities. So that's really important, that they have some people that can reinforce, like, no, there's value in what you have here, and this is how you have to channel it and how to do that.
And I think with the defense ecosystem, especially on the startup side, really opening up, there's now another path for some of the more entrepreneurial people who are getting out of the military, like yourself, to go work at smaller companies and make a difference. Do you know what I mean? Because in the old days, what do? You go work in government, you go work for a prime. Maybe you hang up a shingle, put an LLC together and consult, right? But I've been incredibly impressed in the last couple of years, the talent of people who are getting out of the DoD who are like, I actually want to help on the other way and get into defense tech. So
Dan, I cannot thank you enough for those words, but we need to make people aware this is hard work. Dude, I would gladly go back to a government job. We need good government employees. I'm not saying anything negative, but holy cow, like you know how it is. You're living this. It is a 24-hour day, 7 days a week to build your business. You are never shut down. And you have such a responsibility and obligation to the people that have entrusted their families and their well-being to you for you to be successful. I got so much respect for you and the rest of the crew that's out there, like taking this one on because America needs it. But we need to be very clear-eyed with people. This is the hardest business I have ever been in. I had no idea how hard this business is to be successful. And every day is literally a marathon, man.
Yeah, it's about not getting too high or getting too low, right?
Keep it in the band of excellence, man.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So Chris, thanks for your time today. Where can people find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Twitter? Do you have a website? Do you have anything? Nothing. So
call Dan.
You have to call me or email me, and then I'll screen, and then I'll basically see if you're worthy enough to have a conversation.
Not on LinkedIn. I had a Twitter account because I wrote a book and I had to do that, right? Yeah. And I haven't looked at it in years. So I guess give me a call. I'm not going to put my number out.
Yeah, no, you're definitely not.
Thanks,
that'd be very dumb, especially during
I'm
political season when
I'm clearly not a good businessman. I'm supposed to have my LinkedIn. Never looked at LinkedIn.
What is the name of your book? I really enjoyed reading
Soldier Secretary. Yeah, thanks.
Soldier Secretary. If you haven't read his book, it's fascinating. It covers his career. And then it also has some very pointed recommendations about how the DoD could improve what it's doing and really empower soldiers at the unit or platoon level to start kind of testing and pushing the bounds, which is what we need, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.